Well, it's almost the end of the 2022 harvest season, and we've saved the best for last.
They've died back completely, and it's time to get them out. And the topic of today's video is potatoes.
So for our first harvest, we are starting with our all blue potatoes. As most of you know, we grow 5 different types of potatoes, potentially 6, because we had one that was on the fence and then we kind of hummed and hawed and so on and so forth, and it still went in the ground. That's still in discussion. But we're going to start with the all blues. Now these have been subject to chickens, and the chickens have been digging some up for us already. So we knew that these needed to come out pretty quick, but some of them are looking fantastic and we've had a sneak peek. So let's take you on the ride as we dig up the rest of these beauties.
We've done some weeding, and you can actually see there's a lot of potatoes that have come up with the weeds. So we've got this little row here of all blues, and then we have our main double row, which goes all the way down to the end of the red Russian kale down there.
Unfortunately, with our double row here, we crowded a little too close to the kale and the peanuts and so on, and it has been really human traffic trampled quite a bit on this one row. So I'm not holding my breath that there's going to be a lot come from the one side, but we've definitely seen some really nice ones come up in the second row there. All in all, pretty excited. And this is only our first type of potato. Now, I will say I have no concept of how much weight this is yet. We're going to figure that out, but unbelievably wonderful, uniform, good-sized potatoes. We had very few small ones, which just drove me nuts last year because I can't stand the little small ones that you got to clean the skins, and it seems to take forever, and I end up not using them, and I use all the big ones first. So that was one of the things in our decision making was, let's make sure we're choosing big potatoes to plant as seed potatoes so that hopefully we get some bigger ones. Now, Chris is going to take you down and just kind of show you what we've got from our rows, because everything's kind of lying out right now, which, you know, makes it easy to talk about, because we did have one slight issue.
So looking down the single row, you can see we actually did pretty good. And switching to the double rows, we've kind of amalgamated these as we went. Again, we did pretty well until we got to the end of the row. And what we were finding was, even though this is a fairly well drained garden, the soil down there was a lot heavier and a lot wetter, and we just didn't get the number of potatoes as what we did on the sort of north end of the row, which is just ever so slightly upslope. But all said and done, that's a lot of all blue potatoes.
Now it's time to try and weigh these, so hopefully we can make this work. Hopefully it'll go in here. Oh my goodness, it's heavy. 40.6.
So these are the all blues.
Well, there it is, out of the crate and on the piece of plywood to kind of dry out before we pack them away. Basically, a little bit over 40 pounds of weight. Now, originally we started with 15 pounds of seed potatoes in the ground, so really we're working at about 3 to 1 right now as a ratio with these ones. I'm curious to see which variety is our best producer on that. I know after doing a little bit of Google research that you kind of can expect between 4 or 5 pounds up to 10 pounds yield per pound of seed potatoes. Now, we've never really tracked that and paid attention to what we put in the ground as opposed to what we got. So it's going to be interesting a little bit because we have a basic idea for most of it, what we put in the ground. So like I said, we started with these all blues with 15 pounds, and each year it's getting better and better, but we're also planting more. So I don't know if it's really resulting in better yield per pound, but it's an interesting experiment or, thing to try and figure out. Type number 2 is our Yukon Gold, and we're going to show you in a second just a little scan, because it's kind of like Where's Waldo in here. This is an absolute disaster garden.
Scanning around the garden, you wouldn't even know this was a garden, but buried in there are 4 rows of Yukon Gold potatoes that we've got to go and try to find. Well, as we clean this up a bit so we can actually get in here and find the potatoes, I just wanted to remind everyone that we kind of do a, what do you call that, I guess, a modified roost out method. We do bury them, so we dig trenches, and they're not very deep, they're kind of just barely buried. And then we cover them with a really deep layer of basically hay mulch, and you can see now some of these we've pulled out, but they were starting to pop out of the ground, and even though it looks like a complete jungle, this method's been working pretty good for us. So it doesn't look like much now because a lot of the hay has rotted down, but it seems to grow nice potatoes. And for anybody who tends to think of geese as big, mean, nasty birds, this flock of American buff geese has decided to come help us weed what's left of this garden as we pull potatoes up. And there's the 2 rows along the fence. You can actually see the 2 rows pretty well there. They stand out. They're a little bit mounded, which is kind of what we did. So we're going to get digging and see what we end up with.
So a learning curve, or a little bit of a disappointment, I guess, that's developing here as we're starting with this back row. Now, we know this was a bad row in the first place because it was shaded and dwarfed out and smothered by weeds and also by the snake gourd. So hopefully as we get to higher ground, we'll see some potatoes. But so far in our digging, nothing. Just rotten seed potatoes. So row 1 didn't deliver as well, but as we said, we started with what we knew was going to be the worst row. Once we got to higher ground, as you can see, there were some bigger ones and a little bit more, but from a 20-foot row, that's not, actually it's probably more like 24 feet, wasn't a lot of potatoes. So let's see if row 2 does any better. Row 2 has now been added to row 1. We got some really nice big ones up at the top of the hill there, as you can see. And as we go down again to the lower bit where it was wet and very weedy, it gets a little bit sparser. But still quite a few more out of the second row than there was in the first. And we still got 2 more rows to go.
These Yukon Golds are interesting because with the straw mulch or hay mulch on top of it, we kind of pull it back and we're finding quite a few of them clustered at the surface, which is nice because they're all very close together. But these 2 rows here have been a lot more productive than the other 2 rows. The only real difference seems to be shading, which is obviously important, and the soil is a little drier in these rows than the other 2, so we kind of know going forward how to do a little better with the Yukon Golds.
So Yukon Golds, they are all harvested and collected, and we're about to weigh them, but one thing I just wanted to say as we go into this is we originally planned to plant 15 pounds of seed potatoes. Then we added some potatoes that we had stored over the winter for eating that we didn't consume, and they'd gotten some legs on them. So we're kind of guesstimating that we're probably 22 to 25 pounds of actual seed potatoes were planted. So I have a feeling that these did not do as well on our ratio kind of scenario here as the all blues did. Good production, but as you saw, they were in some really, really stressed conditions, and I think that's something that we need to improve on. So, moment of truth. How much did we get? 41.8 pounds on the first milk crate. And then we got a little surplus bucket of 11.2. We've established that we have 54 pounds of Yukon Golds. So, considering we put in 22 to 25 pounds, we're definitely not getting that 3 pound threshold for sure. So less on this when I would have expected more from a potato that produces a really nice big size. So all in all, lots of food, lots of potatoes to go in, and we still have 5 more types to go.
Well, we are now back at it in a different garden this time, and we have a double row of the little red skin variety that we have that we do not know the name for. It's a good keeper, and they stay quite firm.
They've got a nice white center like a russet potato rather than a softer yellow center like a Yukon Gold. So they're nice to have, a secondary one that stays as a nice firm potato.
So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing, take out all the weeds, and I'm going to make note of it because we've been doing it, but you do want to pull the plants, basically the green part of the plant as it dies back, because it's good to take that out and compost it elsewhere. So we are going to do that as well. So we're going to do that first, and then we will get digging. So a couple things before we even dig here is, one, this variety seems to be super productive. Now, we were talking about this. This was planted after the ones that you've already seen harvested. So the Yukon Gold and the All Blues. And there seems to be a lot. Now, interestingly enough, when we planted these, they had already sprouted, and some of the sprouts were quite long. So what we did was we actually laid them along the trenches that we dug. And this variety seems to like that. Not all varieties do. Another thing about what we're noticing here too is because we do use the mulch, so a bit of a modified roost out method, it definitely depends on the potato, I think, as to how well they perform, because each variety has its own unique production qualities, and each variety grows in different ways, etc. That's why they're unique and different. And one thing I will definitely say about any varieties that have a colored skin, if they get exposed to the sun, you don't seem to get the same problem with them changing to a green the way that a lot of the white varieties do. So as you've seen as we kind of go around these, a lot of our mulch layer, which was quite heavy, has over the summer months broken down, and some of the potatoes have become exposed. The blue varieties and the red varieties seem to deal with that better, but just some food for thought, I suppose.
And another little tidbit is all those potatoes that you see on the ground behind Chris, those all came out just as we pulled the plants. We haven't even dug yet, and
No.
look at them all. Definitely prolific.
So one little correction before we dig too. We just did a double check, and we thought these were the little red skin variety that we grow. They actually are the all red, so this is a variety that's pink on the inside. And honestly, that's looking like our best harvest ever of them, even before we dig.
They've
so
never done this well.
Very curious to see what happens there. But I'm going to take this moment to contradict what we said in our recent video about less is more. Potatoes would be one of those things that if they have different qualities, production qualities, taste qualities, that sort of thing, or unique qualities that make them appealing to have as a food item, you can keep, like we do, multiple varieties. So you could just grow one if you just want the same kind of potato for everything, or you could grow multiple varieties, because for the most part you're cloning them, which allows you to have that diversity. So we keep going through the different kinds, and that's why we have them. Each one has a unique quality that we'd like for one reason or the other, and hence makes them worth growing. So this is one of those times where less varieties may not actually be as enjoyable as more varieties, because frankly you can have more.
So just because potato harvesting is like Christmas and we want to share the excitement with you, we've removed the potatoes from the top on this end, and Chris is about to make the first dig. The ultimate question now is, were they all on top, or are we going to find more? Because I'll be honest, it was an incredible top harvest. Oh, I see more.
I see quite a few more.
Look at that. Oh, wow. Put them all just right in front just so we can see what comes right from that one. Sorry, I know you already threw a couple, but... And we already took a lot off already. So exciting. And these ones honestly are so pretty inside.
That plus what was on top.
So we've got that little bit and all that still. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to see what these guys produce. I'm betting, I'm gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna say that we're gonna get at least 75 pounds. They're a little smaller. Let's go 60 pounds.
Sure.
What's your guess?
I was gonna say 50 or 60.
From 2 18 foot roughly. We didn't actually break out a tape measure, but from 2 18-foot rows roughly. Look at the haul of potatoes. I'm so curious on this. So curious. So let's box it up and see what we come out with. Now, the one thing I will say about these, and I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but there was a lot of little ones, and I hate the little ones. All right, Chris, it's the moment of truth. Are you sticking with your first guess of 50 pounds?
I think I'm going to go 55.
55. I'm still going to stick with my 60, but let's show them what we got. We have a full milk crate and almost a full white bucket, which is phenomenal. These produce so well. And these, like we said before, have already been kind of selected. We've taken out the smaller ones, which we have no intention of using. And this is only our good stuff for keeping here. So let's, without any further ado, weigh it. 40.4. Second bucket, 13. So that's 53, almost 53 and a half. You're victorious, Christopher, on the guessing on the potato harvest.
But I went over. Jeff.
Yes, I guess, but still. Since we're going through the yield ratios of everything, these ones have been phenomenal because we actually didn't do well with these last year. So we only saved 8 pounds of seed potatoes. That's all we had to go in. And 8 pounds produced almost 54 pounds, which is the same as those Yukon Golds that we put 22 pounds at least in the ground. So these are sitting pretty nice with about 7, not quite 7 pounds per pound of seed potatoes. So we're liking these ones. These may get upscaled next year. But one of the things that's interesting with the potatoes, though, is that it's never the same. You're going to move them around. You're going to put them in a different spot. They're going to like it better. The rain's going to be different. There's always something. So this is where it's kind of nice in this situation to have these varieties because some do well, some don't. And it always seems to kind of flip and be vice versa the next year. But as you can see, it's already starting to get a little bit dark. So we're going to end this one right now as part 1 of our potato harvest for 2022. But be sure to leave a comment down below just what you think we're going to harvest by the end of video 2 and the rest of the potato harvest.